undoubtedly the largest and most consequential political scandal in recent American history, perhaps modern American history. We'll see how it plays out, is the Hunter Biden laptop scandal. It is the bloody glove, so to speak, of the OJ trial of politics. It is the most bombshell piece of political evidence on planet Earth, and it has been in the hands of the FBI for about 4 years now. Well, what have they done with it? What has anyone really done with it? Well, they've castigated it as Russian disinformation. They've told you you're not allowed to talk about it or even mention it. You can get ripped off Twitter. You can get ripped down from social media just for talking about it until now. Recently, it has been verified as 100% true by multiple corporate media outlets who have, I personally believe, a very different agenda here. I think they're trying to get rid of Joe Biden. But Joe Biden and his criminality and some of the horrifying details revealed of the Biden crime family on the laptop, Joe Biden may just be getting rid of himself. Who knows? The web is being unwound, and the person who started this thread, the person who dropped the original bombshells and was right all along, Miranda Devine of the New York Post joins us now. Miranda, thank you so very much for being on the program. The author of Laptop from Hell, The Secrets of Hunter Biden's Laptop Revealed. You are the person with whom we put a nickel in the jar every morning and say, Miranda was right. Ching, Miranda was right. Miranda was right. Because you have not been wrong on this issue. And now it seems like the entire corporate world, corporate press, it seems like the side of history now, you are on that side and everyone's joining you. What are the most recent revelations in the laptop saga? And what can we expect recently from your reporting?
Look, I think probably the most significant development is that we now know that the grand jury in Delaware that's been investigating Hunter Biden for 4 years for various offences such as tax evasion and money laundering and sort of foreign lobbying violations, all to do with his international influence peddling scheme. That grand jury has started to ask people, witnesses, about the big guy. They are asking, who is the big guy? And we know from Hunter's former business partner, Tony Bobulinski, that the big guy is Joe Biden. That was the way that Hunter used to refer to his father. That was the identity of the person who was accorded 10% of a joint venture deal with China. That was 10% for the big guy. That was 10% for Joe Biden. And so that's significant because what it's telling you is that the Delaware investigators are pulling on the threads of Hunter's business dealings. And as soon as you do that, at the other end is the President of the United States.
Mm-hmm. Your most recent article and column reflected that. Do you believe that Tony Bobulinski will be called in to testify?
Look, I think he ought to. I mean, he's given, he's probably the most credible and the most public, anyway, most credible of the public people we know that have got knowledge of this influence peddling scheme. And he came out before the 2020 election, just a few days after we published our first story from the laptop, an email showing that you know, one of Hunter Biden's business partners, his Ukrainian benefactor from that corrupt energy company Burisma, was thanking Hunter for introducing him to his father, the vice president in Washington, D.C. So Tony Bobulinski handed over a whole lot of his material, the contents of his devices, including what's not on the laptop, but which is WhatsApp messages, encrypted messages, which he had with Hunter. And a lot of his material, which I have and I used in the book, is overlaps with the material on the laptop, but it also augments it, especially with those WhatsApp messages and some documents. So that material, and Tony Bobulinski being a self-made businessman, a successful person in his own right, and also a former naval veteran, and from a line of Navy veterans, he has a lot of credibility. So I am I mean, I would have thought that the grand jury would want to hear from him, even though we know that they have that 6 hours of FBI testimony that he gave in 2020. You would expect that they would want to hear from him. And maybe, as I said, they're saving the best till last.
Mm-hmm. Can you crack open this laptop? Because there seems to be, of course, an inordinate amount of disinformation out there about the laptop. Misinformation, it seems to have been an entire operation around discrediting the laptop, which, of course, we just can't state it enough. You have been right every step of the way, and it took an enormous amount of bravery to do this, and we just thank you for that.
Thank you.
Can you crack open this laptop for our listeners and viewers and explain what are the most damaging items inside of it from your perspective?
Look, I guess what you need to understand about the laptop is this complete mess. This is covers 9 years of Hunter Biden's life when he was a raging crack addict, sex addict, hooker addict, traveling all around the world. Had a whole lot of balls in the air that he was, the front man representing the Biden family, traveling to Kazakhstan and China and Romania and various places around the world, and was sort of being wined and dined by Russian oligarchs. And he flew into Moscow and had breakfast in the home of one of Vladimir Putin's sort of right-hand oligarchs. He flew into Beijing, as we know, in 2013 on Air Force Two with his father, and did a deal there, which was 10% of a private equity fund, a part owned by the Bank of China. And Joe Biden went and shook hands with his partner there in Beijing. So I guess the most obvious incriminating material on the laptop when it comes to Joe Biden, who's really the important person. I mean, my book is not about Hunter Biden, a crack addict. It's really about Joe Biden and this entire family influence peddling scheme that he really started 4 decades ago in Delaware and just internationalized when he became vice president. But there's just so many instances that are catalogued on the laptop, but also Tony Bobulinski tells us of Joe Biden meeting with Hunter's overseas business partners. He had that meeting in Beijing. He met them multiple times in Washington, D.C. He met Chinese, he met Russians, he met Ukrainians, he met Kazakhstanis. He met Mexicans, I think I mentioned, and he invited them to his own home at the Naval Observatory, the vice president's official residence. He met them at least once at a dinner that Hunter organized at an Italian restaurant called Cafe Milano in Georgetown, where he met multiple of these business partners, and he denied it. During the campaign, Joe Biden said he knew nothing about his son Hunter's overseas business dealings. Well, he did know about them. He was involved in them. He was the product being sold, and he met these people to, glad hand them and show that he was the product that they were buying, which was his influence and power around the world, and particularly in the countries as vice president that he was tasked by President Obama to be in charge of, to be the point man for. And millions of dollars flowed into the bank accounts of Hunter Biden, his uncle Jim Biden, who's Joe Biden's younger brother, also involved, and also their other business partners. And that money, there is a lot of evidence of it on the laptop, bank statements and so on, but probably the most comprehensive money trail of one aspect of this sort of family grift was presented by Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson, the Republican senators who investigated Hunter Biden's corruption, particularly to do with Burisma, and they found a whole lot of Treasury Department official documents, which so-called suspicious activity reports that banks are required to file with the Treasury Department if there is money coming into American bank accounts that they think could be suspect or from suspect corrupt sources. And there were 150 of those suspicious activity reports that we've heard so far to do with Hunter Biden and Jim Biden. So probably the most disturbing deal that was being done is one that really would seem to compromise the then vice president, now president. And that was with this Chinese energy company, CEFC. And the Biden family was entering into a joint venture with them. That they were paid, Hunter and his uncle were paid around $5-6 million from CEFC in 2017, and another family friend was paid $6 million in 2017. And that's sort of used to say, oh, well, Joe Biden was already out of office, who cares? No, that money was paid for the work that they had done, and which is itemized on the laptop in 2015 and 2016. In the last 2 years of Joe Biden's vice presidency, what they were doing was working on behalf of CEFC, which is not just a company, it is the capitalist arm of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is President Xi's baby. It is his imperialist push to basically take over the world, to become, to overtake America as the world's economic superpower, to tie up all these developing countries in debt traps, to buy up their natural resources, rare earths like lithium and so on that are needed in, for instance, electric cars and those batteries, and also to buy infrastructure. And so this was something very detrimental to America's national interest. And yet here was Joe Biden and his family being joint venture partners with CEFC and being paid after Joe Biden left, but for work that they did during Joe Biden's vice presidency. And that is pretty damning and quite frightening.
Was Joe Biden not overseeing Chinese policy for the United States this time?
Exactly. He was the point man for China. And so when he flew into Beijing in 2013 on Air Force Two with his son Hunter, he was there to do crucial work on behalf of the United States and its allies in that part of the world, to stop China from militarizing these islands in the South China Sea, which now are such a threat to, whether it be Taiwan, Japan, Australia. And he also was supposed to stop China from stealing America's intellectual property. And he did neither of those things. He came away empty-handed from that meeting with President Xi Jinping. His son came away with 10% of a private equity fund that was worth $2.5 billion, or had $2.5 billion under management by 2019. It wasn't worth that, but that's how much money they had invested. Very lucrative business for Hunter and the family. And you also have to understand that not only did Joe Biden meet with these people and was aware and facilitated Hunter doing private business using Air Force Two and other public perks of his vice presidential office, he also had commingled finances with Hunter Biden, evidence of shared bank accounts, evidence of shared debit cards, and also that Hunter was paying some of the bills. There's some evidence, not a lot, but there is a little evidence that Hunter was expected to pay Joe Biden's bills. There was maintenance and upkeep on his home, in one of his homes in Delaware, building a retaining wall, painting, fixing shutters, replacing air conditioning in a cottage on the grounds. Also, there was a monthly AT&T phone bill that Hunter was paying for Joe. So all of this put together, certainly there is circumstantial evidence that Joe Biden was intimately involved in this family influence peddling scheme, in which he and his influence and power were the product that countries around the world, oligarchs, shady characters, were willing to pay millions of dollars to buy that influence.
It is remarkable to see some of the most discredited journalists in the country suddenly come to your side and say Miranda was right after all. Michael Isikoff over at Yahoo News did this week, asking if there should be a counterintelligence report, a counterintelligence operation on Hunter Biden, given the fact that the CEFC principal is a Chinese spy, presumably, or at least an arms dealer, and somebody who was detained and I believe charged by our own justice system. Convicted. Yet the Biden name was left out of all those charging documents. Nobody ever mentioned the fact that Hunter Biden was representing this man. Am I going insane? This is actually real?
That's correct. Absolutely correct. In the Patrick Ho case, where he was arrested by the Southern District of New York at JFK Airport, he was a senior guy in CEFC, and he was arrested for bribing United Nations, some African nations, and he was convicted and then expelled, what he called deported, went away. But after he was arrested, the whole of the CEFC enterprise fell apart. So at that point was a crucial stage in CEFC, was just about to do this, the biggest multi-billion-dollar deal to buy a big chunk of the Russian state-owned energy company Rosneft. This was President Xi and Vladimir Putin meeting to join forces. And Vladimir Putin was reluctant, but he'd been sort of forced into China's arms because of some pretty heavy sanctions that were placed on Russia after the downing of that Malaysian Airlines plane over Ukraine. So President Xi, energy poor country, lots of money, decides to buy this chunk of Rosneft. CEFC was brokering this. Hunter Biden, the crackhead, and his bumbling Uncle Jim Biden were right in the center of that. They knew. I mean, there are WhatsApp messages about Hunter knowing that, Director Zhang, who's the number 2 at CFC, is just about to meet Vladimir Putin. He's in this. He's meeting the head of CFC, a guy called Chairman Yi, in his I think $50 million penthouse in the Limestone Jesus on West 57th Street in Manhattan. He's flying around the world meeting these people. He's involved in this sort of geopolitical bombshell that is so detrimental to America's interests. Now, when Patrick Ho was arrested, CEFC collapsed, basically. Chairman Yi, Hunter's mate, disappeared, believed murdered. Hunter believes he was murdered or assassinated in China. And CFC collapsed. The Rosneft deal collapsed, and China had to pay Russia, I think, around $200 million compensation. And that probably all happened because Donald Trump got into office, and the China hawks in his administration including Jeff Sessions, then the Attorney General, had basically issued instructions to all law enforcement agencies in the country to start wrapping up these Chinese influence mongers. And I'm assuming that because shortly after the Southern District was given that memo by Jeff Sessions, Patrick Ho was arrested. But the high level that Hunter Biden was involved in both the Chinese Communist Party and the inner sanctum of President Xi, meeting President Xi himself, and the inner sanctum of Vladimir Putin, all those oligarchs. He was mixing in very high circles. He was mixing with very shady characters. He was flying to Monte Carlo. He was flying to Lake Como. He was flying to Shanghai and Hong Kong and meeting these people, being wined and dined by, Chinese billionaires connected with President Xi, being given, plied with prostitutes and all sorts of delicacies. Like I was told the other day, some delicacy they were given in, I think it was in Shanghai, in a private club. It was dove saliva that's like gelatinous. Apparently it's absolutely disgusting, but it's an incredibly rich delicacy in China. So that was what was happening to Hunter, and he was a crack addict in his own admission, and his father was involved in this. He was being apprised of what Hunter was doing. Hunter was telling him. Hunter was calling him. Hunter was inviting him to meet his partners. This is a story. It's not just about corruption. It's beyond Joe Biden. It is about particularly China infiltrating and running these influence operations in the various highest echelons of America's hierarchy of its leadership. And they obviously saw the Biden family as being grifters, as being venal, and as being the weak link. And who knows? I think that the grand jury is starting to look at that, but it's a story that we really need to get to the bottom of, because now Joe Biden is the president.
Yes. A couple extra granular details here. Joe Biden is a president dealing with a militant Russia that is committing all manner of horrible acts in Ukraine. It's obviously terrible what is happening to the innocent civilians there. This is happening at the behest of the Russian military, at the control of Vladimir Putin, whom has a very close ally that deposited $3.5 million into Hunter Biden's bank account. Nobody's quite sure where that went or why. Is this correct?
Yes, up to a point. I mean, Elena Baturina is an oligarch, richest woman in Russia. At the time that she deposited that $3.5 million into the business account of Rosemont Seneca that Hunter Biden and his partner Devon Archer had founded, she was actually in exile from Russia. She was living in London. And in fact, she invested about 118 some odd million dollars in another one of their entities, Rosemont Realty, which really Hunter didn't have much to do with. I mean, this business was being done, and some of it was legitimate by Hunter's business partners. He had several business partners, and Hunter was really just there as the sort of halo effect, the Biden name. So he would just be wheeled in, to some meeting overseas, and get his dad on the phone and just say, the Biden family is behind this. It legitimizes this deal. And so that's really all he did. He would really probably have no idea about the real estate that Elena Baturina was legitimately buying in the United States all over the country. But that $3.5 million is unusual. That's separate from the 118, and no one really knows where that money went. It may have just gone into the pot to buy the real estate. But Hunter Biden's lawyer, George Nazirs, swears blind that he did not benefit from that.
It is possible that Russian oligarch money and money from the Communist Party of China went to pay Joe Biden's mortgage.
Absolutely, or at least the renovations on his house and his phone bill. That's what we have evidence for.
Our audience who's watching or listening to this podcast is screaming right now, asking, what will happen? When will the coil tighten around Joe Biden? And is that possible here? Perhaps you could illuminate.
Look, I think it's already happening. And I think that's the reason that the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and NBC and so on have started to address this story and admit that the laptop is real now, 18 months after we broke the story in the New York Post. But I think because they're starting to understand that the grand jury is, as I said, pulling on that thread that leads to Joe Biden. They're starting to realize that these charges being investigated against, or allegations being investigated against Hunter Biden are serious, and that they need to get out and ahead of the story. I'm sure that this is, we had Doug Schoen the other day talking about the Democratic Party's misgivings. They're starting to get the jitters about this grand jury. And so that's partly why they're trying to get out ahead of it and then cauterize and quarantine off Joe Biden from the bomb that is, looks like it'll be exploding from the grand jury at some point in the future. And it's not just Hunter Biden. Jim Biden is also being investigated separately. So they're trying to say that Joe Biden knew nothing about it. That's the new imperative, the new narrative. But after the midterms, if, as the Republicans expect, they win back control of the House and the Senate, they are vowing to do serious investigations. And once they start subpoenaing witnesses, one of the first people that you would subpoena, I have been told by a very sound former prosecutor, would be, for instance, the Secret Service agents, recently retired, one of them, who went to Hunter Biden's California hotel room, Hollywood hotel room, where he was on another drug bender and where he just paid a prostitute, I think it ended up being $125,000 by accident on several debit cards because the debit card wasn't working, or maybe she was trying to rip him off, who knows. But a whole lot of money went out of the bank accounts, and the Secret Service agents knocked on his door and said to him in text messages, you have to answer the door because that account is linked to Celtic, and now Celtic, or I don't know if you call it Celtic or Celtic, was the code name for Joe Biden. So you would subpoena those Secret Service guys and say, what were you talking about? Why were you so anxious? Who called you? Did you talk to Joe Biden? What was that all about? They know a lot. The Secret Service agents who allegedly went to the gun shop in Delaware where Hunter Biden had bought a gun, lied on the background check form when he said that he didn't take drugs, because there's evidence on the laptop that shows he was totally taking drugs at that time, crack. And so the Secret Service agents who, after Hunter's girlfriend, in fact, his his sister-in-law, the widow of his brother, who he was having an affair with, she had thrown his new gun in a public refuse bin outside a local shopping centre opposite a school. And then when they tried to find it, the local police came, the state police came, the FBI came, and the Secret Service somehow managed to go to the gun shop and ask for that background check form, the original. And to his great credit, the owner of the gun shop said, no, I'm not going to give it to you. I'm required by law to hang on to it. So the Secret Service has denied that they did that. And they've denied having anything to do with bailing Hunter out of numerous scrapes. But you would subpoena them and see if that's true. And, you'd subpoena all Hunter's business partners and Bob Alinsky and so on. And you'd subpoena bank records. I'm assuming that this is what's being done in the grand jury, but we don't know. I think it would be very beneficial to have that publicly on the record, and then they would impeach Joe Biden. And I think, again, that is important because there has to be accountability. And, it's influence peddling is a disease in Washington, D.C. It's endemic. It's in both parties. Joe Biden just, I guess, did it better and bigger than anyone else. But also it threatens our national security. It's people just go, oh, it's corruption. Corruption always exists. No, this is corruption and bribery at the highest level that really allows China a backdoor into the country.
So you believe that the impeachment of Joe Biden could be predicate on this laptop and the unraveling of the influence peddling? Were laws broken? Can you examine? I mean, obviously Joe Biden has lied on the record about this and about the knowledge of this. We have the photos of him with Devin Archer and so on and so forth. Where would a prosecutor go as it pertains to Joe Biden, given the evidence?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm told, having a nominee account is not legal because that is how people evade tax. So that commingling of finances with Hunter is ripe for some sort of investigation there. Numerous FARA violations. That's the Foreign Agent Registration Act. Now that was put in place to sort of protect America from foreign infiltration. It wasn't used very much at all until the FBI decided to weaponize it against Trump people. So Paul Manafort, who was part of Trump's campaign, went to jail over FARA violations. So they're serious, they're criminal violations. That New York Times piece I told you that was rehearsing Hunter's defenses, one of the defenses they were saying was, well, maybe Hunter would be able to retroactively register as a foreign agent, and then those charges would become civil charges, just as he could, pay back his income taxes that he hadn't paid, and $1 million apparently he's paid back. He borrowed that money from a kind benefactor. So they're thinking that will get him off the hook on the tax evasion. I don't think so, because you can't just pay taxes back after you start getting investigated. And then I don't know how they were sort of airbrushing away the money laundering. So that's Hunter. Don't know much about Jim. But as far as Joe goes, I don't know. I mean, did he pay tax on those gifts from Hunter Biden? I guess you'd have to, he was very careful when he spoke to the partners and the business associates and benefactors to always keep everything on what Tony Bobulinski describes as a high level. You don't specifically mention details, but you don't need that. I mean, Rudy Giuliani has told me that using RICO laws, racketeering laws, this is how he got the 5 families. It's not like anyone is saying, oh, that the head capo has told me to go and kill, Johnny Rotten, or take this money. It's just that you can prove over a pattern of events over time that these people are engaged in racketeering. So that may be another, I mean, that's what Rudy Giuliani tells me is another avenue of interest. So there's ample opportunity there for investigators to take a look. And of course, we know that Joe Biden, while he's president, he has pardon power for his son Hunter. And he also, for himself, he can't be, I guess, arrested or charged. But what happens is that the statute of limitations is paused while someone is president, and then it starts again when they step down. So, at the end of his term, he would then be more vulnerable.
And just a final point here, you believe he will be impeached for the laptop content?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there are Republicans, they're talking big. And so behind the scenes, they say that one count of impeachment would be over the southern border, the disaster with migration, the invasion of America by millions of illegal migrants. They're talking about that as a count of impeachment. And then, this influence peddling scheme that's contained in the laptop and Bobulinski as another thing. And they have been sounding out various people about holding those hearings into the laptop. I think they're talking about, early next year.
Wow. So final question, Miranda, and thank you so much for your time here. What does it feel like to just never miss?
Well, look, it's nerve-wracking. The whole thing's been nerve-wracking. We this is a bombshell story, and it's a lot of responsibility for one newspaper to break a story 3 weeks before the election that should have had such ramifications on the credibility of one of the candidates for president. And then after that, to have big tech censor us, I mean, that was unprecedented, and that really was a shock. So I don't know. I mean, it's like when you're reporting anything, and it's you just want to be as accurate as you can, and it's nerve-wracking, obviously.
Well, your bravery has changed the country, and if it wasn't for the New York Post, then we would not know about this. I am confident that this story would have been buried, and I've spoken to many of the people who originally had copies of the laptop, and they were being shut down by everyone, including outlets that call themselves center-right. And so it was such bravery, and you truly did peel back the onion layer on and peel back the scales of what truly happens in Washington, D.C. I spent 15 years there, and it's truly it's sickening. It is indeed a cancer that has overtaken the city, and the amount of graft and corruption is unsustainable. It's unsustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Third world level corruption, really.
Truly. And the more that Americans understand it, the less of it will be, and perhaps, hopefully, the more people will be punished for it, and we can build something better. Thank you so much, Miranda. And again, your reporting on this has been the bravest honor. I mean, I want to start right now by simply saying I'm going to start a Pulitzer Prize campaign for you. And, I believe in a just world, then you would be winning the vast majority of the Pulitzers this year.
Well, I think it's a little sullied, that prize. Russia collusion hoax Pulitzer Prizes, they haven't asked for them back. And I mean, they've been doing this for many decades. I think the New York Times won a Pulitzer for Walter Duranty writing that the apologist stuff for Stalin. So I'm not holding out for a Pulitzer Prize, and I wouldn't take it if it was given to me.
Well, you will get the Benny-based award.
Thank you. That's much more valuable. Thanks, Benny.
We'll put the right stamp Benny-based award. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for joining us.
Thanks, Benny.